What's up, YouTube? So I want to talk about filing colorism complaints, quote unquote. Basically, what that means is, how I'm defining it for this video is basically, you know, calling out colorism and trying to get some justice for colorism, right? You know, and who you I think this video is pretty much more so directed at brown skin and dark skinned women who file colorism complaints. Um, but sometimes you'll notice that there's like low key criteria that people want you to meet when you're filing a colorism complaint. You may or may not pick up on that, but people, especially black men, um, tend to have sort of like this list of criteria that they're checking off and yet you have to meet. And I kind of just want to go through this and sort of explore, this situation. All right. So, on the surface, these criteria may seem legitimate. You know, it's like, hey, you kind of have to, like, we can't just accept any and every colorism complaint, right? Interesting. But let's analyze this situation, though. All right. So, brown skin and dark skin black women tend to get the runaround when it comes to the black community taking her colorism complaints seriously. Not all the time, but a lot of the times. It tends to get the runaround. People tend to make excuses. People tend to want to all of a sudden come up with all this criteria that you have to meet, right? Like, you can't be a swirler. You can't have a colorism complaint and be a swirler. You can't have ever been a swirler, by the way. Even if you were a swirler in the past, like 20 years ago, they will bring that up if they know about it and tell you that, no, you can't. Nah, you swirled once. Once a swirler, always a swirler. Nah, we ain't fucking with it. Also, you can't have a mixed / biracial child or children and file a colorism complaint, right? They make sure to push that, they make sure they can have their mixed and biracial children, but you can't. Shit, right? Then they want to bring up, oh, you're, creating your replacements or you're creating your competition, just like they doing, right? Also, you can't have a dating history that includes light-skinned, mixed, or biracial men. You will be called a colorist, and this is when they start to project onto you and sort of flip the script and act like, oh, you're the colorist, right? You only date light-skinned dudes. Oh, you only date the light-skinned biracial dudes. Oh, you must want pretty, light-skinned hair, or pretty babies with light-skinned hair, or light-skinned babies with quote-unquote good hair, right? Loosely textured hair, right? They love to throw that up, right? And accuse them of that, even though we all know who's really pushing this whole light-skinned good hair baby agenda, quote-unquote, right? We know who's pushing that agenda, really, right? Who's leading the way, right? Ask any of these first-generational mixed folk, what race their father is and what race their mother is. Usually their father, if they're part black, usually their father tends to be a black man. How could that be? Right? So no, you can't have ever in your life dating a light-skinned mixed biracial dude at any time, and if you do, your colorism complaint will be disqualified. No matter how long ago it was, you could have dated a light-skinned dude for a week in elementary school. Nah, nah. Also, there's more. Okay, you have to be extremely beautiful to file a colorism complaint. You can't be, a basic, mediocre, ugly, brown skin or dark skinned woman. You have to look like a Marla Negra to follow a colorism complaint and have, at least have them take it seriously or pretend to take it seriously. Even then, though, even if you do look good, they will flip it around on you and say, well, what do you have to complain about? You look good. Why can't you get a man? As if colorism is all about just not being able to get a date. Yeah. So you have to be extremely beautiful, but then you can't be extremely beautiful either. So I guess you have to fall in sort of a weird mid place. Not extremely ugly, not extremely beautiful, just sort of like, I don't know, some sort of a weird balancing act that you have to do, like balancing yourself on a tightrope, almost like, oh, can't look too ugly, can't look too pretty, gotta look just right. Yeah. Just more than running game, right? Also, you have to have a very pleasant disposition. You can't be, angry or attitudinal, right? Because then they'll just say, well, that's the problem. It's not your skin color, it's your attitude, right? If only you were just a more pleasant person, a more pleasant human being to be around, you wouldn't have to deal with this type of stuff, right? You know how they like to push that shit. So you have to have a very pleasant disposition, a very pleasant attitude, right? All the while dealing with colorism, right? You have to be pleasant. As if, when these Negroes are dealing with racism, are they pleasant? I don't think so. No, you know. Um, Also, when you're filing your colorism complaints, you can't name names. You can't specify skin tone. You sure as hell can't call out light skinned mixed and biracial women, and you sure as hell can't call out brown skinned and dark skinned men. All right. The only group that you can kind of go after would be the light skinned mixed biracial dudes, and because they tend to have probably the least protection in the community anyway, and also it helps maintain the colorism hierarchy by doing that. While if you were to call out the brown skinned, dark skinned men and the mixed biracial light skinned women, it would challenge the colorism hierarchy. And they're not going to have you challenging the colorism hierarchy. They're not going to tolerate that. All right. you know, um, and if you do name names and if you do be specific, they'll just write you off as being jealous, bitter, angry, insecure, can't get a man, right? This is the reason why you can't get a man. So you notice that there's like a lot of criteria that you have to meet, right? Let's suppose that you actually meet all this criteria somehow, some way, because I'm sure there's some women who can meet all this criteria. You could never have swirled, don't have mixed or biracial children, never dated a light skin mixed or biracial dude, be extremely beautiful, but, be extremely beautiful, but not too beautiful. Have a very pleasant disposition, not name names, be very PC about it. How do you think this would play out still? Just think about it for a minute. If you could actually meet all this criteria, do you really think that, it's going to, let's be real, how you think this is going to play out? Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Your colorism complaint application will not be accepted no matter what. All right? If someone's giving you all this criteria, and also the finish line changes constantly anyway, right? If you do meet this criteria, then they'll just push the finish line even further somehow, some way, right? And I'll put it like this. You could be the most pro-black black woman. You could wear your natural hair, never swirled a day in your life, don't have biracial kids, married to the king of West Africa, have the darkest, blackest children who ever lived, and they still won't take your colorism complaint seriously. Somehow, some way, for some reason. I don't know. It is. They'll think of something, right? They will think of something, all right? And at this point, they're playing a game with you. They running game on you, right? But the thing is, the game is rigged. You can't win. It's they have rigged it, and you're trying, and you're thinking that this is a fair game, and if only you just met the criteria, right? Even if you do, right? It's still something. The ugly truth is, as a collective, these folks don't give a damn about your colorism complaints. And definitely don't give a damn about your colorism plight. All right? I hate to say it, but we just got to be real about this. We got to be upfront. You know, I don't know. Again, I think this ultimately traces back to maintaining the colorism hierarchy and maintaining the status quo in the black community. If folks start taking black women's or brown skin and dark skin black women's colorism complaints seriously, right, that sort of challenges the colorism hierarchy and challenges the status quo. And in order for the colorism hierarchy to maintain itself or to be maintained, black women, brown skin, dark skin black women have to be at the bottom of it. They have to be the foundation of it, right? We know that brown skin and dark skin men aren't going to let themselves be the foundation of it, right? And you can't really build you probably could build a foundation on the collective of light-skinned people, perhaps. I feel like that could be an option, but I think that perhaps that is less likely to happen because light-skinned people, have, say, light-skinned privilege, so that would allow them to sort of sidestep some of the colorism hierarchy bullshit, right? And I have a whole video discussing the colorism hierarchy in the black community, by the way, where I really go into depth about this and just, break it down step by step by step, going down the ladder or, down the pyramid, whatever we want to call it, the hierarchy, right? But something I want to bring up, though, as far as filing complaints about colorism and just filing complaints in general, all right? All right, do these same people have these criteria or even similar criteria in regards to black men who file racism complaints and want and expect black women to support them while these same black men are filing colorism complaints? They're married sometimes to non-black women, right? They have biracial children, right? And they even actively, perhaps even support a white supremacist structure, right? But seemingly you're supposed to excuse that, right? That's supposed to be excused when these Negroes are filing their colorism complaints against white supremacy, about being discriminated against, being oppressed, being shot down in the streets. Like, not even animals, really, because I don't even think animals are getting this sort of a treatment. At least animals, at worst, just get tranquilized, Also, the school-to-prison pipeline, poverty, etc., 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 right? You notice that this sort of criteria doesn't seem to come up, although it probably should. But why does this, these racism complaints seem to have, seemingly no criteria associated with them, at least from the black community, right? But I think white people will probably pull that shit with them, right? Give them the runaround, right? Now you know how it feels, shit, all right? But you're supposed to excuse all that for them, right? And come to their defense and support, what they're doing shouldn't matter, right? In fact, they can still be pro-black in the absence of the black woman of any shade, right? That's the trend that's being pushed right now. That you can be pro-black and not even be married and to a black woman and have biracial kids. And I'm just like, I think that's actually that's not pro-blackness. That's, you know, pro-multiculturalism with some pro-black seasoning on it, right? And that pro-black seasoning in this multiculturalism is really just seasoning to cover up white supremacy. Because really, when you really break it down, I really think that multiculturalism ultimately is just sort of like a friendlier version of white supremacy, like a remix, more friendly version of white supremacy. I could be wrong, but that's kind of like what I get from it. And I find that a little interesting because when these like white supremacist, white national types talk about multiculturalism and diversity, they're like, oh, multiculturalism and diversity equals white genocide. You know, that's how they are viewing that, you know. And for me and for, I think, other black people, I'm like, well, you know, when it comes to multiculturalism, I kind of think that it could actually be viewed as sort of like black genocide in a way, you know. Like, it's just code for black genocide, you know. But these dudes can do all this bullshit, right? And their colorism complaints can still be taken seriously. You know, at least by the community, you know? And people will have discussions about this. Like, oh, can you be pro-black and be a swirler, right? Usually it tends to be centered around black men who are participating in that, you know? And it's just like, you know, really? But y'all can't cut, you know, a sister some slack when she want to file a colorism complaint. No. And y'all supposed to be the pro-black brothers, right? Who are supposed to be so down for blackness. But really, you know, pro-blackness at this point tends to be like a code for a pro-black man, I think, at this point. Especially if you're like a swirler and you're on this, you know, pro-black-ish. I think it's kind of just pro-black man shit instead of pro-black people, including black women. But that's another video. I'm gonna bring this video to a close. But thanks for watching. You know, please feel free to comment and let me know what you think. Until the next video, adios and goodbye for now.